Mm.
Be fine.
Why is this not, what?
Camera up top there, do we gotta move it?
You should move automatically, but we can,
They're just showing me.
this is odd. Normally it like kind of
Zooms
zooms in a little bit.
Oh yeah, you can see it. It's like facing the wall over there.
Why is it?
Do it.
Do you want me to?
And then somehow you
I can't, won't move anywhere.
There we go.
it's slowly moving.
That's
Panoramic.
Odd.
And then zoom
we
in
go.
so people can really see Michael. Hey, good morning, everyone. We're going to get started in just a couple minutes. Our camera is not zooming in, and we'd love for you to be able to see our speaker better. So we'll get started, I would say, within the next 4 or 5 minutes. Glad you're here. right, we're back with you and excited for our presentation. My name's Rebecca Buller and I am the Education and Prevention Manager here at Wayside Recovery Center. And we're going to start with introductions. I'm going to introduce the people in the room here or let them introduce themselves. Let's see. To my left, and I'm not sure what direction that is for you. Go ahead, Sherry.
I'm Sherry and I'm with Wayside.
And Lucia.
Hi everyone, I'm Lucia French. I'm also with Wayside.
And I have our presenter here.
Michael Borowiak, good to be here with everyone.
Okay. Rick, it looks like you can't do the microphone, so I'll just let people know that Rick Moldenauer is with us from DHS. And then let's move on to Matthew. Matthew, would you like to unmute and introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Matt Myers at Traverse Counseling and Consulting.
Wonderful, welcome.
Thank you.
Amber, would you like to unmute and then go ahead and introduce yourself and let us know where your affiliation?
Hey there, I'm Amber Laughlin with Bemidji State University.
Welcome, so glad to have you. Jody, would you like to unmute and go ahead and introduce yourself?
She doesn't have a microphone or
Oh.
camera, she said.
Okay, Jody. Well, Jody Bergman, we're excited, is our first ever Recovery Corps navigator, and she's working at our Family Treatment Center, Wayside Family Treatment Center in South Minneapolis. Welcome, Jody. Marilyn, could you unmute yourself and let us know more about you?
Hi, I am Marilyn with I'm peer recovery specialist at Welcome Manor Family Services in Garden City.
Great, wonderful. Welcome. And Christy. Christy, do you know how to unmute yourself? You just click on the little microphone.
She doesn't have
She
a
doesn't have a
microphone either.
Okay, well, Christy, will you let us know where you're a counselor at Women's? That's right. Hi, Christy, welcome. And DJ Morris, that's Deb, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Deb, and I don't think you have a microphone or a camera, so we want to just let people know that you are, oh, do you have a microphone?
No.
Hello.
Oh, yeah, that's you.
Oh, hi, Deb.
Hi, everybody. This is Deb Morrison with Homeland Security Investigations Victim Assistance Program.
Thank you so much, Deb. And Tamara. Ooh, I was like, I know who you are. Go ahead and please introduce yourself.
Hi everyone, I'm Tamara Galen. I'm over at Wellness for now.
Welcome. So glad you're here with us. All right. Well, today our topic is safety and wellness in relationships, and we're going to look at dynamics of coercion and control. And I'm going to turn things over to Michael, and then toward the end, if you'd like to type in your questions in the chat, Lucia is monitoring that, and we'll share those with Michael. Or you could unmute if you have something that you want to add to the conversation. I think you're comfortable with people interrupting if you have something you want to say. We'll make sure that you all get a copy of these PowerPoint slides when we send out the evaluation after our session today. So, Michael, go ahead.
All right. One, just grateful to be here with everybody, and grateful to talk about an important topic that I think is really germane to where our work. And so to get us started, I want to just give you a little bit of background about me, and you might even ask the question, why are you talking about this issue? Why is this of interest to you? So to give you a backdrop, it'd be probably important for you to know my why. And if you think about Simon Sinek's work about Know Your Why, for me, it's about helping and being with people on their journey to alleviate the suffering that they're in. I know that I can't cure their suffering, but I sure can help them see things. And for me, it's been about curiosity, just trying to understand what happens and how do people get stuck, and ultimately, how can we help them out of it? I'm part of an agency called Traverse Counseling and Consulting. We are an agency in St. Louis Park, And we take a very strong systems approach to treating basically any issue that comes in the door. So if somebody has a mental health issue or individual struggle, we're looking at it through the context of the relationships they have in their lives. We do a lot of family work. We also work with families that are experiencing incredibly complex issues that can be related to substance abuse, mental illness, divorce or conflict. And I guess we're blessed with the team of people that have each other's backs and work well together to help support families finding wellness. I invite you to take a look at our website, traversecc.org. There's some information at the tail end here with our contact information. And certainly we look forward to being a resource to people as needed. Sometimes just phone calls make a difference. So I'm going to just jump into this. And I know that people are going to have questions as we roll. So if a curiosity should occur for you, it's okay to ask. I'll do my best to try to integrate it as we go. Certainly, if I can't get to it right away, I'll do my best to capture it at the end. The old saying is, where there's curiosity, there's learning. So you're here because you're curious about this topic. And so feel free to engage your curiosity. I have grown to see this issue of safety in relationships as one of the most important things in any healthy relationship. And if somebody doesn't feel safe, it has a profound impact on people's well-being, the well-being of children, and I would argue the well-being of our society as a whole. So as I've done the work that I've been engaged in, particularly with families with more complex issues, often the issue of safety has been broken or breached. And really the first aspect of our work is how to reestablish that and reset it. And in some cases, clarifying that this is not going to be able to be reset right now. And so we need to take some different steps first. I've grown more passionate about this, especially in the last 10 years. Since 2014, I've been working with Hennepin County courts, family courts. They've been really doing a concerted effort to try to help address coercion and control dynamics, especially as they're trying to resolve marriage or couples disputes that get pulled into family court. And if they're not screening for it, there can be very difficult outcomes, or that families find themselves recycling back into the court system. So I've been blessed to be part of that effort that they're undertaking, and continuing to do that. And I believe that they've done a nice job as best they can to improve on how they're screening for this issue, and helping professionals to modify how they operate, to first identify power imbalance, and then making good decisions about how to proceed in the best interest of children and in the adults. So with that, I'm going to move to my next slide, which is really just what are we here to do and talk about today. We're here to talk about strategies for discussing safety in relationships, and discerning whether to reunite, and also to discuss elements of relationship repair. A third one that I didn't put on there, and it has it in the description, I'm going to walk you through a screening tool that I actually have found to be one of the best that I'm aware of in the industry, and a tool to share with you from the Battered Women's Justice Project, who has, in my opinion, done just some outstanding work in building this tool. I'm just going to show you one small element of it. In that sense, I would really encourage you, if you're curious, to take additional steps to reach out to their website, wwjp.org, and look for the protocol that I'll show you some of that later. So to get us going, I'm going to move us into just talking about what do we know about healthy relationships. Well, if you think about the life cycle of relationships, people usually find themselves attracted to each other, and then they enter into a courtship. And then as they continue that, there's greater and greater degrees of intimacy that they develop. And as they move forward with that, they agree upon what are the boundaries of closeness and separation? And as they grow closer, there can be greater complexity within that relationship. That requires relationships to people in relationships to negotiate those, to be able to see and to evolve in their relationships with each other. And challenges happen in this because we're not static human beings. We grow and change as we get older. And as we do, and as we change, the relationship requires that we take time to monitor and support that. Certainly in my work and in my colleagues' work, this is where we start to see couples having distress or challenges, is that they've often been stuck in a pattern, and as they've grown and developed, there hasn't been a way for them to come back together to talk about the differences and the needs that they have with each other, and to renegotiate how they're working in this closeness and separation. The other thing I'll add about this is it's my belief, and I got biases, so I'll share them as we go. No one person can meet all of our needs. And so it's important that we have ways of connecting with each other in our committed relationships, but also to know that there may be friends that I have that I do things with, or other extended family that I might spend time with. And that's part of healthy relationships. We can go more into that if people have more questions in that regard. We know that there are some different types of dynamics in couples. And I have 4 different subtypes that I want to share with you today. So these are couple dynamics that when I'm working with couples in therapy, I'm trying to figure out what is the pattern that they're in. And these are a couple of them that can be helpful to take a look at. The more I understand about the dynamic that couple is in, the more empowered I am to try to help them figure out how to move forward. So the pursuer-distancer, this is kind of a classic couples dynamic where when a couple starts to grow and change over time, there can be trying to engage or to try to work something out, but it's not very effective. So they're trying to repair things, and so you have someone that's initiating, trying to resolve something, but then their partner is uncomfortable and will withdraw and distance themselves. And so then the pursuer can then continue to pursue, and then the distancer is withdrawing more and more. So we can see this as a dynamic that can be ineffective. And certainly if people have a history of trauma, if they get more and more stuck, it can create a great deal of anxiety and frustration in couples. The next example is fused or enmeshed. And this is where there can be couples that just have a difficulty in separating. They have anxiety in other areas of their life without having the presence of each other. There can be a dynamic where somebody is over-functioning or under-functioning. And we see this really in substance abuse family systems. The one term that you'll often hear is codependence. My preference is that using it from this lens of looking at the enmeshed relationship. To understand it, I guess we would look at it as there's a family is trying to create homeostasis. They're trying to make everything work. And if one of the members of the family is not functioning well, then it's typical for family members to step up and may overfunction to accommodate that. And so it can create this great imbalance that can create a great deal of problems or difficulties and frustration. The next case is disengaged. This can be a case where couples are just living parallel lives. They have very little connection. they're kind of just doing their own thing, there typically is little conflict because they've disengaged. They're not going to get in a conflict. They'll avoid it. They'll check out. And typically are staying because of the kids or out of habit or comfort or a mild degree of comfort. And the last one is where there is violence or coercion and control dynamics or safety is compromised. Interestingly, couples can go through multiple types of these dynamics.
Mhm.
There are some couples that can stay in one dynamic, but there are also couples that can evolve and shift from one to the other. Violence and coercion can show up in any of these dynamics. We typically see violence or coercion more so in the pursuer distancer and fused and meshed. The disengaged are typically checked out. That's not to say that it can't be there. And we typically see violence and coercion in the top two. So I think the purpose of helping you see this is that when we work with the clients that we're serving, this actually can be a helpful dynamic to perhaps even educate members of the family that you're working with. Because if you can help them see the dynamic that they're in, it can also give you help them with ideas of how do you move out of this unhealthy dynamic, and certainly give them choice and possibilities or hope, right? Because if they're in treatment or they're trying to get help and they're trying to come out and trying to re-engage with their significant other, it's hard because there may be anxiety about coming back into one of these. So we can take more questions about that if people have it. For me in our agency, and probably for most of us, it's safety. Safety is the key to this all. And we are not going to be able to heal ourselves or our relationships if safety is not present. And when I talk about safety, I think it's about, can I have physical safety, that I'm not going to be hurt physically? Can I have emotional safety? Can I have spiritual safety? And it all comes down to the question, what is needed to be safe? And it's hard because this may certainly can change over time as we grow and change. There may be more things I'm needing. And if people are in a trusted relationship, there's more flexibility. So I come back to safety because when safety is not present, we have fear and we have anxiety. And it's important that when we have fear and anxiety, that we do our best to try to understand what that's about so that we can support someone in their own healing. And if there's a relational healing piece, we need to help them with ideas or thoughts on how to move forward in that regard. I think it's important to know when to slow down. And so if somebody is stepped out of a relationship, perhaps to take care of themselves if they're entering into treatment or trying to heal themselves or taking a pause in the relationship, it's important for them to take consideration. What are they needing to maintain their own wellness, centeredness, sobriety, and boundaries? And is my support system in place to be in there when things get challenging? There's some key things. We know that when people are making changes, if they feel as though they have to compromise their own wellness to be in the relationship, is likely that they will relapse into old patterns. Support systems are key. Having other people around that can provide guidance, wisdom, help. And for many, it's okay to titrate the contact. It's okay to ease back in. We often will see this with sober housing, if they're in a relationship. That this can be a helpful piece because as someone's maintaining their own wellness, if they enter into a stressful relationship before they're ready, it may not go well. I look at this as zero depth swimming pool. My kids like to go to those splash pads where you can start and play at the shallow, ankle deep water, and then you can ease into the deeper end if you want. So this is a helpful tool to help people to understand how relationships can go. And before you go to the deep end, well, maybe we need to make sure we get the lifeguards up, and maybe I need to make sure I know how to swim myself in this water before I can go to a deeper end with someone. As you go into a deeper end, it's more vulnerable. So safety is a key piece of helping create structure for people. You got to know when to know when to fold up, know when to walk away.
If anybody is asleep.
So I hope you're all awake now. I just really like Kitty Rogers, a gambler, and I just think it's really important to know when to exit. And so this often can be something we're trying to help people determine. What do I do? If safety is compromised and cannot be repaired, it's important that people take steps to stay out of that relationship. If it's not healthy for you to stay in it, it's not life-giving. And certainly if respect and dignity cannot be restored, these are circumstances where we would want to take seriously a chance to look at maybe it's time to exit out of this relationship. So this is a really, for most people, this can be an easy discernment if you don't have children. Okay? So if this relationship is not going well, and I get clear about where I'm at, I don't have kids, it can be a fairly easy exit. There may be financial things or a car that we have to divide up, or there can be easier ways to split it up if needed. But if there are children, this really can be complex or difficult. And so typically for parents that have kids, it's not only their own safety that they're concerned about, it is the safety of the children. So we have to be, I think we have to be good at assessing this. We have to be able to assess, does somebody feel safe, but what about the kids? And there are parents that may choose to stay in something as a way to protect children. I don't have much slides on this issue, but I think it's important to take note of it. And we'll walk into more of the assessment around this. Here's a working definition of interpersonal violence. So IPV is a reference that I'm going to be talking about. It's important to take note of this. Any incident or pattern of behavior directed towards a current or former intimate partner that results in physical, emotional, or psychological harm, sexual or reproductive coercion, economic control, and or coercive interference with personal liberty. This is a big definition here that a lot can fit in here, but this is, to me, the only part I don't, it's not inclusive of sort of spiritual freedom. There can be religious coercion. So I want to just put a little caveat onto this as well. So this is an important issue that our community sometimes struggles with looking at. It can create a great deal of discomfort for professionals. Many professionals in their formal training to be a therapist or a social worker will get some information about this, but it's been my experience that not enough. When I've presented to groups of therapists or social workers, and I will ask them, how many of you had formal training on IPV, what to look for, and how to navigate it? Out of 40 people, I'll get 3 or 4 people. That's sort of a common response. So for me, this is it's concerning. And so grateful for everybody that's on the call today and part of this, because we have work to do to help our professionals, areas in our profession, learn more about this. Because there can be strategies or therapeutic approaches, things that we're implementing that actually could be making things more difficult for families and possibly harm. So it's important that we all take steps to learn more about this. So IPV, it's not all the same. I'd have you think about it as a continuum. There can be situational interpersonal violence, where there's an explosive fight that happens, and there can be things said or done physically. And there can be extreme terroristic IPV that terrorizes someone in that dyad. And it may not be safe to re-engage if somebody stepped out of that. And the other interesting thing is IPV may start and may stop. You can have periods of time where it can escalate, and there can be periods of time where it appears to be abated. So if you're working with someone on an ongoing basis, ongoing screening is critical. If you're working with someone, there is immense shame if you've been a survivor of IPV. And so until they feel comfort with you, they may not initially tell you that this is what's been going on. So it's important that we understand that there needs to be an ongoing sort of screening. And as you create greater trust, they may share with you. It is also possible that you may be operating where somebody feels so ashamed and keeps it secret and may not tell you. So with IPV, the use of third parties is critical. We certainly have therapists that can help with this, advocates with the courts as well. Often when IPV is present, a third party is critical because they can operate as a way to intervene and help the system try to correct itself, or to find ways to establish boundaries. Where there's terroristic IPV, it's often the need for orders for protection, harassment restraining orders, domestic abuse, no contact orders, the DANCOs. All of these are different sort of court-related interventions that are set up to create boundaries via court order. Sometimes those are necessary. I also would be careful with those because just because there's an order doesn't always mean that safety is going to be assured. So trying to understand the nature of it can be helpful. Someone has an impulse control problem and is perpetrated, there can be greater levels of risk in that regard. I want to walk you into this SAFER, this Bad Women's Justice Project SAFER model. This was built just a few years ago by Gabby Davis, Leonard Frederick, and Nancy Versteeg here in Minnesota at the bwjp.org website. And if you look this up, you can go to the website. It's SAFER, and it's the acronym Screen, Assess, Focus, Respond. The component that I'm going to be talking with you today is about the S, the screening. You certainly can take the greater levels or additional steps in this protocol. The purpose of it was to help in the forensic investigation of families in family court, and we're looking at custody studies. What we were seeing is that when there were custody studies done, there was perhaps a light screening of IPV, but they didn't go into a great enough depth to truly understand this. And so, again, I think this is some of the best work that I've seen. This is a series of steps that you can take fairly quickly and easily for your area or your field that you're in. So if you're working in a treatment center and there's a client that's coming in, male or female, that you can easily walk into this assessment tool just to identify, do I have something here? And if I do, then it gives me information that I get to then discern, what do I need to do with this?
Mhm.
So that's always the harder part, is what do I do next? If we have time, we'll walk into that today. More so, it's just helping you just be aware. This is a very nice interview tool that can help you to discern, do I have IPV present or not? So it's important that before you begin an assessment like this, you have to explain some things to the client that you're working with. You have to tell them about your professional standards, that this is something that you need to do to assess or to determine. It has an implication on how you're going to carry out your professional responsibilities. You have to tell them about your role. Why are you doing this? And what steps you plan to take to carry out your functions of your job with this. What you will or won't share with the court if they were to subpoena that or get the records. And so you're really trying to create a sense of structure or safety for the person that you're interviewing. You have to be clear about the scopes or limits of confidentiality and your duty to report suspected child abuse and certain serious crimes. So this is really important, because if you're not telling the client this basic information and you get information that requires you to report, you've in a sense created a hurt, or some would argue a trauma. You've broken perhaps a trust that they have perceived that they had with you to share something very intimate that they're likely very afraid of bringing it out.
A new unsafe.
A new unsafe now.
Yeah.
So when we do this, when we tell people about this, we actually create greater agency or autonomy for them. We give them the choice that they can choose to share or not. And so they just know what to expect from us as we do this.
Mm-hmm.
So in this sense, we're setting the stage. We're setting it up to say, here's my job. Here's what I'm doing. I screen for this with every case that comes in. Here's why I'm looking to get this information. If I'm in treatment, I'm trying to understand, how are you doing? What are the dynamics outside of here that may be happening? Maybe there's a history that I want to be aware of. And are you safe going back into the environment after you leave treatment is an important part of that. And also being very clear within your agency or in your profession, what are those lines of when you need to report something to CPS or elsewhere. And be very clear with the client about what the line is so that they know and are truly informed about this. I can't emphasize this enough. If we set the stage well and they report to us, then it's really clear how you proceed, and they already know what's going to happen, typically. So when we do this, we create safety for our clients. Also, if we tell them this, they may not share with us right away, but through our work with them and the relationship, and if we continue to clarify this, they may in fact choose to share with you. But that's their call, right? We have to respect their agency and what they're comfortable with. Here's the safer protocol. I want to walk you into this because I just think this is really pretty straightforward, but it's a nice tool because it gives you, and you have a series of questions I'm going to walk through, but at the end, while you're asking the questions, you have this page right here that I have on the screen that allows you just to check off, what are you hearing in these different dimensions of abuse? And this really helps to just clarify what's present here. All right, so you think about this, if you clarified where you're at in the relationship, or here's my role, here's the limits of confidentiality that I have, here's why I'm asking, and here's what I'm going to do with the information, you can walk into this. How comfortable are you interacting with whatever person that you're referring to now? Do you have any concerns, fears, or anxieties that I should be aware of? What worries you most? Again, I'm just sort of walking into the relationship and asking them, And on the right side, what you're trying to just assess, and when I use this, you have the arrows between the personal interaction statements of comfortable, uncomfortable. I usually am using that line, the arrow line, as a place where I just put a hashtag on where I think the client is. I'm just looking to gather information. You have the checklist at the bottom that can actually help you, because if they start reporting things, you can begin just checking those things. This is an important and helpful tool, at least starting with this first question, just asking about fear. What are their worries? Mm-hmm. The next question, if you look at all the questions, is a series of kind of going a little bit deeper, right? The wading pool or the zero depth swimming pool, we're just going a little deeper in. When you look back over time, how are practical everyday decisions made in your relationships? Your relationship, how did you arrive at that arrangement? Are you comfortable with that? What happened when disagreements arose? Is it equal or dominating, cooperative, coercive, responsible, irresponsible, fair, manipulative? And my experience has been is that when you initiate these sorts of questions, you're inviting them to share the story of their relationship. So a sidebar question could be to say, how did you guys meet? Would be another way to walk into this. How comfortable are you interacting with this person now? So, if you need a backup question before you walk into the screening, you can just start doing a relationship history. Go to the third question here. Is there anything that gets in your way of doing things you want or need to do in your daily life? Managing your daily affairs, meeting your basic needs. What about your kids? What about your responsibilities, making your own decisions, interacting with other people? One would around this could be around social. They may want to talk about social. Are you able to go and hang out with your friends? That's an interesting one that we can often see of control. Mm-hmm. Interestingly, with this question, you can also talk about what about your phone? How do you manage phones in your house? Okay, mm-hmm. So in coercive controlling dynamics, we often see direct control over phones, what's on the phone, reading phones or text messages as a way to control. GPS devices on vehicles can also be a function of parts of that. So again, we're just trying to get understanding of what's going on for them. And we move into, has there ever been any physical violence between you? And if so, can you tell me about that? Trying to see, is this something very rare, minor, or no harm? Do we have, is it frequent, every day, very severe? And has there been injury or hospitalization? An interesting question on this is, have you ever had an injury that in hindsight you thought it might have been helpful to have gone to the hospital? Okay, so that's another interesting question to kind of draw that out a little bit. Because there are many that receive significant or serious injuries that may choose not to seek medical care. And we're just trying to get an understanding of what's happening for them. Next one, have you ever felt so ashamed, humiliated, embarrassed, or fearful by something you or blank said or did to the other that you didn't want anyone else to know about? And if so, what can you tell me about that? And sometimes they don't want to tell you specifics, right? Remember, if this is a shame factor, they may not want to say something about it. And this may be something that if you come back to, they may share with you after they've built more rapport, trust with you. The next one goes into, again, the deeper end of the pool. Have you or blank ever forced the other to do sexual things the other didn't want to, or insisted on having sex when the other didn't want to? If so, can you tell me about that? Again, they may not want to talk about that. Again, you're inviting them. Each of these questions is an invitation to share, and they can certainly choose not to answer it. And you have to be the judge of if they get quiet or not say anything, it's okay, we can move forward. Or the other part of this is sometimes asking these questions can affect people significantly. So really looking at what's happening to them as you're asking the questions, and given your role and your clinical judgment, it may be appropriate to slow down or to pause and come back to this. The next one is, have you or blank ever been concerned that the other was going to physically or psychologically harm the other, the children or the pets? Important one to check. And this would be they're worried about the safety of the kids. If they have kids, how are parenting time arrangements currently being worked out? If they're not separated or divorced, how are the care of the kids being handled right now?
Mm-hmm.
Are you comfortable with that? How did you arrive at that arrangement? Trying to figure out, how did that decision get made? Is that a shared, or is that a coercive or manipulative type of dynamic? And are there concerns about the safety of the kids? All fair questions, important ones. Again, as you're doing this interview, you're starting to identify the different types of coercion and control, or the dimensions of it. I don't necessarily types, but the different dimensions of it. We have physical or sexual abuse, emotional abuse, control of daily life, economic abuse. So before I walk into these interviews, I typically am looking at this checklist first and then going back to the questions as I prepare to review. Again, this is public domain information. BWJP received a federal grant. These are things that you can download from their website for free. And it's a fairly long document, but you can pull up the screen, and these slides right here, you can pull out of that and use it for your work. There's some pitfalls for not screening. If we're working with couples and we're trying to help them with repair and we haven't screened for this, the survivor's safety may be undermined through couples counseling. You may, in fact, reinforce the power of the perpetrator. You may put the survivor at risk or perceive that they need to stay in it. There's a risk that some professionals have that this is just a relational problem. There's an interaction pattern that's between them. And this is a problem because it implies that the survivor is a cause to the abuse that's happening.
Mm-hmm.
And so if we don't screen for this, we can inadvertently create more problems. What we found in the research is that when they're not screened, that particularly women did not feel safe, did not feel like they could open up, and felt fearful. And that in the surveys that I was reading and the research, none of the interviewees discussed this with a therapist at the time, in part due to the intimidation of their partners. So if you're ever going to do any couples work or family work, screening before you're bringing the two parents into, or the partners together, a screening should be done on the front end. Can be fear of retaliation or low-level aggressions. And there are cases, many cases, where couples counseling is not appropriate and may cause continued harm. And we have to remember that screening may not show up initially. So this is not an easy topic or an issue to handle. So we need to continue to be screening for this. Before you're doing any work with any couples, you need to be screening both partners for IPV. Just a thought on some ethical guidelines or principles. Priority one is to protect the children directly from abusive and violent environments. We need to support the safety and well-being of those who are survivors of abuse. And then third, respect the rights of adult survivors to make their own decisions and direct their own lives. Yeah. This is an interesting piece here because when we detect IPV, one of the risks is that we may step out of the role that we're in and we will enter into advocacy. And unless your role is to be an advocate, you may be taking on a role that may not be appropriate. So therapists that can take on an advocate role are not providing therapy, they're moving into advocacy. It's hard because when we see IPV, it affects us personally. When we hear the details, it's hard to hear. So as a professional, it's important that you, I didn't put a slide on this, but talking to each other professionally in consultation groups, our supervisors to help. Priority 4 is hold perpetrators accountable for their abusive behavior. And then after that, priority 5 is allow children access to both parents. These are helpful because it really sort of clarifies what we're really needing to look out for. And may be helpful for you. This is my cue to stop talking, and I want to make sure we, there's a lot that I've put on the table here to talk about. I would be curious to hear from folks some reactions to particularly the screening tool and some of the challenges that may come up with this. So I guess I'd open up the board here to see if there's anybody has any questions or reactions.
Katie, I know that you had a question. I don't know, I don't remember if you said if your computer had a mic or not, if you want to unmute yourself. Let me borrow this quickly. Yep. Sometimes I can help. Let's see.
Yeah.
Katie, I've unmuted you if you want to go ahead and ask the question you and I were chatting about. Oh, you don't have a mic. Okay. Well, Katie, I'll go ahead and read off what you had chatted to me earlier. Katie had asked earlier, Katie's a peer recovery specialist at Wayside, and she had asked, what about people who are unsafe in relationships, but that's all they've known in relationships? How do they work to disengage when those relationships are the only relationships they've experienced?
That's a really a great question. And, I didn't get tuned into this. When you're steeped in this and you look at this and you study this, you get pretty comfortable with it and you can make presumptions that people know what IPV is or how it can be in the relationship. And it's a great point. If you've always lived or experienced this growing up and are currently in one, how would you know that this is not the way other people operate, that it could be different? I think that the screening tool is where I think you actually have an interesting opportunity to educate people. And I saw this when I gave a presentation to a Women in Recovery group, and I think there were lots of questions about these dimensions and wanting to learn more about it. So it's important that if in your work that you have the ability to orient your clients to what is a healthy relationship. What does it look like? And also, here's what coercion and control looks like. And allow them to soak in that information so that they have a good understanding, and then helping them to understand what can be done, what are their choices, what are their options. Go back to motivational interviewing. If you don't see a problem, why would you try to resolve it? So by educating folks on what are healthy relationships and dynamics, or rights, you have the right to.
What's your autonomy?
Yeah.
If you don't have a sense of autonomy, how do you know how to be in relationship?
Sure.
Yeah.
It's a good point. So we're really respecting the sense of agency that people have. So education is key. So if you're working with folks, women or men that are in recovery, talking about healthy relationships and where is it starting to move into unhealthy would be a great tool to help them. You could go back to some of the dynamics of couples. You can start sharing that. And then you can also walk into here's what coercion and control looks like. What you may find then is that if you orient them, it's important that you're taking time to follow up with them, to ask them, how did this fit for you? What are you seeing for you?
Mhm.
Is there anything in here that fits that you like or you don't like about your relationships?
Are there-
Christy had a question as well. She also doesn't have a mic, but she's wondering if you are able to talk briefly about how we can help clients manage relationships with either their parents or the parents of their children who have been abusive and do not respond well to attempts to set boundaries or distance themselves.
So I'll go back one, the education of what's healthy and what's unhealthy with boundaries. Boundaries also implies decision-making as it relates to children. So if you have extended family or parents or grandparents who may want to cross a boundary and take on responsibilities that are not theirs, that might be important to distinguish that. If it's co-parenting, that's where it can be difficult. So I would go back to the interview and start looking at what are the coercion dynamics. And then we don't have time to get into today. There are strategies that partners or co-parents can engage in to try to manage coercion and controlling dynamics. There's caution in that because there is typically a fear factor that is quite strong and maybe quite legitimate because of history. So it's often the need for kind of customized strategies that may involve advocacy, shelters, and looking at possibilities for advocacy through a court system to create those boundaries. And then on the other end, you can also look at ways for parents who are trying to create boundaries to be declarative. Here's a boundary that I'm going to keep, and here's how I'm going to operate. You can also invite others into trying to do some repair work with a third party if both believe that could be helpful. Good question.
And then Katie had a follow-up question as well. Chrissy said, well said, thank you. And then Katie had a follow-up question of when working with women, either through the screening tool or just in general, and if they're unwilling to disclose the information, even in a trusted relationship with a counselor or therapist due to shame, what do you do then?
Yeah, the hard part is that you don't know what you don't know. So again, I would go back to the education piece. And in fact, what you could even tell people, if you're doing a group presentation, you could talk about the shame that women or men carry that have been survivors of this, and invite them when you feel as though it's safe for you to share. Invite them to do so, and you may have to keep providing the invitation. One invitation may not be enough. Yeah. You may have to keep just saying, "Hey, it's okay if you want. It's up to you." Always respecting the agency of the person. They will determine when it is safe and okay for them to share. And we can't coerce them, right? If we force them to share, then we're doing exactly what they've experienced. So that's not healthy. So patience, care, concern, compassion. So good questions.
Yep, Kate said makes sense. Thank you.
Do you have any last thoughts before we kind of wrap things up?
I think the next slide, I have some contact information that, whoops, keep going. There we are. I would just invite you, don't hesitate to call or reach out if you need to, okay? So my website or email or call. Happy to provide support to people if you're trying to figure something out or what to do. It's important that we work together as professionals, because I don't always have the answer, but if I've got somebody I can call to phone a friend, right? Mm-hmm. When you have that, it helps you be a better professional to support people that are suffering. So again, it's the invitation. If you're needing support or thoughts or ideas, don't hesitate to reach out. And encourage you also to bring this back to your own agencies to talk about how are we going to handle this issue, and can we together arrive at the best way to do this? Mm-hmm. You can introduce the screening tool, say, can we look at this and talk about this and decide how could we implement this as an agency? Because then if you have the support of leadership to do this, it makes it easier to implement any sort of changes.
Thank you so much. Lots of information to kind of think about, and also think about the systems where it intersects within agencies and in practices. We will send out all of this information to you. Make sure we have your email address. So if you haven't yet and you're concerned about that, type something in the chat and Lucia will make note of it. And we'll get you the evaluation survey where you can also indicate that you would like continued education verification. As always, we want to invite you to share ideas for topics or speakers with us. We're here to do the legwork and keep this going twice a month. And we want it to be something that's helpful to all of you in the work that you're doing. If you'd like to participate by being a presenter, we'd love to have that happen. Or if you've got a case that you thought was difficult and it turned out great, or it's difficult and you want some help with it, let us know. Let's put something together and use many minds to help find answers. Next ECHO session is on October 17th. And at that time, we're going to hear from Dr. Amy Krentzman, and her topic is Gratitude and Addiction Recovery, Theory, Research, and Practice. And we're very excited. It's some new research, extremely new. I think she just completed it within the last year, and we want to hear more about what she's doing in that area. Gratitude's been a part of many 12-step programs, and what she found was there wasn't a lot of scientific study material to back up that what we kind of knew or have been doing. So that's what she was working at. And then also I want to invite you all to, if you like this format, the Zoom format where you can join us from wherever you are, we have a Friday forum coming up on October 18th, and the topic is Gray Matters, as in the color gray, understanding co-occurring depression and substance use in older adults. And we'll have Kay King here from NAMI, Minnesota, community educator, and will share with us some of the unique considerations when working with older adults and both their depression, anxiety, and substance use considerations. So I want to thank you all for being here, and we're going to let you all get back to your day. Have a great day.